And we are back with more of the Total Theater Tony Show here on Dave's Gone By. And, this year, the Regional Theater Tony, which is generally agreed upon first by the American Theater Critics Association, and they make a recommendation to the wing in the league, and usually, almost always, it's adopted. And they chose the Wilma Theater Company in Philadelphia. And I thought, hey, let's get a Philadelphia area theater critic to weigh in, not just on the Wilma, but on Philadelphia theater in general. And this is a guy I've known for many, many years. He used to write for This Month on Stage, a hard copy review publication I was doing back in the 1990s. But he's also written for the Broad Street Review and the Chestnut Hill Local and Montgomery papers all over Montgomery County. He now has, and has had for a little while, his own website, birdreviews.com, which is an appropriate name because he's Frank Burd, and he's with us in the neighborhood now. Welcome. First time to the neighborhood, Frank Burd. How you doing?
Hi, Dave. I'm doing okay. I'm getting out to theater as much as I can. For whatever it's worth, I'm dealing with long COVID, but you know, um, it's still it's so exciting to be in the theater and to experience new things or find versions of old things.
Now, let me ask before we get to anything specific, what was the best show you saw in and around Philly this year?
Wow, that is so hard because I've seen several shows by 1812 Productions that I loved, the Flatlanders, as well as their production of Torch Song. They did a great production. Um, I loved I loved Interact Theater's shows that they've done this year. I mean, it's been really good. They did something, a world premiere of The Last Yiddish Speaker, and recently something called The Climb. I love that. And Tony Braithwaite up here in Ambler um, does some great stuff. And Arden is always doing interesting stuff. Uh,
Now,
um,
this brings us to, again, before we get to like the Tonys itself, that, when you started reviewing Philadelphia theater, there was not this level of production and quality or quantity. Like, how long ago was that? And what was it like when
no,
you
the
first?
truth is, I moved to Philadelphia after college. I wasn't so much involved in theater. But growing up in New York and going into the city by subway to see off-Broadway stuff or sit in the back row of the balcony with binoculars at a Broadway show, I went, this is a wasteland. There's no theater. There's nothing good. There's nothing much. The Walnut Street Theater had not been reopened, even though that's America's oldest theater, until the 1980s when Bernard Havard came and revitalized it in its original in its building. So there was nothing. And then little by little, by the time of this was 68, by the 80s, theater was underway and so many different theater groups starting up. And so that's when it really started to get good and more spaces and more theaters. And it became a very exciting place. I even tried to start my own theater for a couple of years, but I'm not a producer.
And what was the name of your theater company, by the way, back in the? Do you
What
remember?
do they call it? Independent City Theater.
Hmm.
And I did 5 shows over 2.5 years. And I thought the shows were good. We even got reviewed. But you need a full staff. You need producers. You need so many people. And I had a full-time job. I couldn't just
Oh,
vacate my job to run theater. And I had young children. So it was okay. Um,
you did it, and it probably informed your work now as a theater critic. Not that it made you easy on plays, but at least you understood where directors and producers were coming from in trying to put
Well,
something
it made
on.
me understand a lot. As I said, maybe I didn't. I've directed some 50 plays in my lifetime, so I have a point of view from a director also. And when I see a show that's not working for me, I have to ask myself, is it the writing? Um, is it the directing? Or is it the acting? And a lot of people sometimes criticize the acting, and I know it's actually this is a good actor, and this person didn't get the direction he or she needed. So it's a real tricky thing, yeah.
Now, speaking of tricky things, you're a little reticent in talking about the Wilma Theater, even though they won the Regional Theater Tony this year. They're going to be honored tomorrow night. So, first of all, give us a little background, a little history on the Wilma.
Well, I don't remember when it was when I started going to the Wilma. They had a little site on a street called a little theater called Sansom Street, and it was run by Blanca and Yuri Ziska. Um, they were immigrants from Czechoslovakia. I don't know when they came in the 70s, and they created some really interesting offbeat stuff in a very small space that I found fascinating and liked most of the time. But then again, who likes all theater anyway? Um, but it was interesting. And then I forget how many years ago it was, maybe 20 years ago, they moved to a large venue on Broad Street, a big theater, and they continued doing stuff. And then Blanca retired from the head of the theater about 2 years ago. And she comes down to openings. She's moved away, but it's in other people's hands right now. Um, so,
And you haven't particularly liked at least the last year or two of the work
well,
they've been doing.
see, how do I put this? The last show I saw there was very, very challenging for me. It was Brecht's the Good Person of Szechuan. And they did a 4 hour production with one intermission that was so, so hard for me to deal with. The person I brought with me said, "Can we leave at the intermission?" And there were many people who did. And of course, you can read other people who loved its unique approach, which is, how do I put it? The Wilma Theater stuff in the last 2 years has been over the top acting, over what I call overacting. But that's just me. I do not assume I have the last word in what works and what's not. I only know what works for me. And so the last production, and the one before it, what was that one called? My Mama and the Full Scale Invasion. It didn't work for me as well either. And yet they've produced, last year, they produced a play by a show that went to New York and won, I forgot what it won for the playwright.
Oh,
Which I had just had a gallbladder operation, so I missed that show. Um, but
but that probably put them on the radar
I,
strongly
I
because
think
of that.
so. That show back in the fall um, was a major show. I think the playwright's name was James I. James. It's a very strange combination of names
Was
because
was
it,
that Fat Ham?
yes, Fat Ham.
Okay, got
Did you
it.
see it?
I can see it. I'm in Maryland now. I'm not even in New York, but Fat
Okay.
Ham has been all over and James I. James has gotten a lot of plays done. So
And I've
that's
seen other stuff of his that I've liked, and
yeah.
I tried to watch it on video, and it's a play is not meant to be seen on video. It's your eyes are moving all over the stage. Your eyes are following this actor who's reacting as opposed to this who's talking. And so I couldn't appreciate it. But I've seen other stuff that James I. James has done, and he's really good. So, and how do I put it? Wilma takes chances. They go out on a limb, and
Well, that's
like I said,
important.
recently
Yeah.
their stuff hasn't appealed to me as much as the stuff that Blanca and Yuri used to do.
But I'm saying it's like had the Tonys decided to award the Walnut Theater, a lot of critics would go, "Oh, come on, they're just doing old musicals from Broadway from this," and then it's like yawn, 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 even though audiences love it, or and it's
Let me
delightful stuff.
let me say something about the Walnut, if I may.
Sure.
Uh, So I actually rented space in the small theater upstairs at the Walnut to put on some of my plays. I even rented space from the old Wilma when I was had my own theater. Um, and they had a theater upstairs that sat about 75 or 80. And I loved what they did upstairs, which was so different from main stage stuff, new stuff, that stopped during with the pandemic, and they haven't begun their upstairs stuff. As far as the main stage stuff, they do stuff that makes the theater successful. They sell out. They do popular musicals, popular plays. I saw a play there. It was an outstanding production of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf that they did with Greg Wood. Greg Wood is currently touring with To Kill a Mockingbird for the last 2 years, but he had some time off, and it was outstanding production. So they tend to do about 3 musicals and 2 non-musicals every year, and they're always filled. Um, and the
But
other thing
sometimes
is,
critics and organizations don't respect that as much
I know.
as the theater that goes really out on a limb and is taking wild
I
chances.
know, and I think Bernard, who's the producing artistic director, has realized that, and so he's not put his theater into the Barrymore mix because people would say, "Oh, they have money. Oh, they have this. They have that." They didn't measure the quality or the show. They wrote him off too easily, and I'm not going to say I love everything that they do, but I don't review anything at the Walnut because I know Bernard and it would be a conflict of interest. I know him too well.
And,
I know
and you
all
said
the,
something really, before we got you on camera, you said some really nice stuff about him. He was really, really helpful to you when you had a terrible,
when
tragic
I
tragedy.
had a serious injury, um, he sent me flowers to the hospital. He invited me down to his place to stay for a few days. He had a place near the Jersey Shore, and he's just such a kind man, such a good person that I actually saw a preview once, a final preview before a show opened of his, and I liked it so much. I said, Bernard, this is a preview. I would like to review it because and so I did review one Walnut thing, but that was exceptional.
Cool. Well, it has been exceptional talking with Frank Burd. I want to send people to his website because you can read his reviews of Philadelphia area theater there. It's birdreviews.com. And spelled
Incidentally, Bird is spelled with a B-U-R-D,
right,
not a
not like the,
B-I.
yeah,
Okay.
BURD, birdreviews.com, to hear more from this man that we are very happy and proud to have in the neighborhood. Thank you so much, Frank.
Thank you, Dave. It was a pleasure.